is up? I'm Rick, the Fat Man GM. You may or may have not have heard of me mabbling and rambling on a few of the YouTube channels and Facebook channels regarding to our hobby, role-playing games in general, tabletop games, wargaming, so on, etc. I have started back when I was in my early teens. I have well over 40 years worth of experience in this hobby that we love and share, and a big part of what I like to do is go back and revisit a lot of the stuff that I have and have accumulated in my gaming career, if you will. Everything from MERP, Starfleet, from FASA, a slew of Dungeons and Dragons and Shadowrun, Star Wars, etc., etc., etc. And I revisit these items individually, and hopefully to give some nostalgia for myself, to give you a little bit of an insight into some game system that you may or may not have heard of or may have not had the opportunity to play, and to remind those of us out there that do have them that these are quite viable and still entertaining today. So here we go. All right, my friends, XP experience. This is a building block of the traditional fantasy role-playing game. You'll find some version or variant of it in most RPGs. Not all, mind you. There are a few that do not use the standard D&D style experience development for characters, or for the experience for developing your characters. Some of them use dice pools, some of them use skill advancement. I run into one or two games that actually have none at all, and your character is what your character is, and there's no real room for enhancement, as in learning new things or advancing and gaining new additional defense and offensive modifiers, etc. To try to quantify that in every style system would be more than I'm willing to go to do, and it would take quite a few more of these videos, and it's not really my intent. I want to touch on a few things that, and then we're going to do a little more in-depth, right? Because I want to show you some of the stuff from the early days and up to modern versions specific for Dungeons and Dragons, but also in a couple other variant games that share some similar roots to the old OSR D&D from the back in the day kind of stuff. The reason this is in my brain and it's been in my head for a couple weeks now was a short discussion I had with somebody over Milestones in 5th edition D&D, and I don't have an issue with Milestones. The way it basically carte blanche states, you do X amount of encounters, you earn a milestone, or X amount of sessions, you earn a milestone. That's fine. I have no problem with it. It speeds things up. To a certain degree, in my personal opinion, and you know who I'm talking about, you know, if you see this video, you know I'm talking about you. In my personal opinion, which is always just what I think, I'm not trying to speak for the industry or for the hobby or for all of you, just for me. It's a lazy way of doing things. It reeks of video games, and while I've played my share of video games, I'm not overly fond with how certain editions of games, modern game or role-playing games, have tried to bridge that gap, or tried to somehow, they're trying to cater to a generation or several generations who are immersed in the console game style of play, and that's fine, but trying to bring that to the table, to a role-playing game version, it's not going to work well, in my opinion, and you lose so much. One of the things, in my opinion, that sets role-playing games apart, the pen and paper version from a video game, for example, is the level of intimacy of control that the player and the storyteller or the game master or the narrator or whatever you want to call the person who's coordinating the game have. You cannot get that in a video game yet. Who's to say what the next generation or 10 generations down the road will do, how interactive they will be. In the grand future of things, I truly expect to see something quite like the holodeck from Star Trek in our future, if we don't obliterate ourselves before we get there. But that's not likely to be in my lifetime, and probably not in yours. Juniorette and juniors, keep that in mind, that life moves along no matter what we do. You might think you got the world at your feet at the moment, and you do. Capitalize on it while you can, because when you get to be about middle age, your priorities start to change, and you realize a lot of the things we thought were seriously important really weren't. It doesn't matter. Anyway, so experience, XP. My personal opinion. When I first started, it's like anything. What is experience? This is how we know we're gaining information and knowledge, that we're getting better at what we do. And it doesn't have to be in a role-playing game or in a games period. This applies to real life too. When you go to school to learn facts and information, and a lot of it you really won't need later down the road, but some of it is the foundation or the filler for the next level of expertise that you're going to want to have a decent career or to pursue your personal hobbies or whatever interest you are. As an analog example, if you happen to like working on cars, you didn't just pick up a wrench, open up a hood, and master the mechanics of fixing your vehicle in that moment, did you? Trial and error, some education, some fails, some successes, help from your elders and instructors, yourself, Google, what have you. You learn as you go, and you gain moments of epiphany. I chose that analogy for good reason, because in '85, when I got out of high school, I went to go be an automotive diesel mechanic. I went to a place called Lincoln Technical Institute of Mechanics. It's under a different name now, and they run ads sometimes talking about marine motors or motorcycles or different things, but it's the same idea. It's basically a trade school for learning to be a mechanic. And I learned I wasn't impressed with their style. You really didn't get a lot of information. Your classroom mechanics were basic, and you didn't learn a lot that you couldn't have learned at home with tutelage from your parent, your dad, or your grandpa, or your mom, or whoever likes to turn that wrench. Second, I don't like working on vehicles. I learned that I really don't have the patience. You really need to have patience to be a good mechanic, I think, in my opinion. You have to like it, and then you have to have patience. And I didn't have patience. When I was 16, I was working on a 67 Chevy pickup that I had. The distributor on those models is set at the very back of the motor, and it's kind of up against the firewall. So there's a bolt down there that you can adjust that lets you turn it a little bit. That way you can get it in sync, and is tuning it up so it runs right. Getting my hand down in there was near impossible, and I was having a horrible time with it. I think I worked a couple hours, and it was hot and muggy. That working on something and you're frustrated, you don't have the patience. All you wanted to do was start the thing up and go someplace with it. You didn't really want to be under that hood. I was working at my grandfather. My grandfather was a mechanic for the majority of his life. He was also a minister and had a small church and so on and so forth. He was a character. He sat there and let me work on it for like 2 hours, and finally I gave up. I literally threw my hands up in the air and threw a wrench across the backyard, and I was done. My grandfather come out and he says, "Well, it's never going to get fixed if you don't finish." There's a lot to be said there, right? You start a project, you need to finish it, or get somebody else to do it, right? In this case, being that my grandfather was a master mechanic, he was also quite wily and wise and smart, and worked on things like this many, many times. And do you think he fixed it for me? No, he did not. But what he did do is go out to his shed and bring back this very strange wrench that was about yay long and had been bent on one end, and gave it to me and says, well, he loaned it to me and said, here, this will reach that bolt you're having so much trouble with. And of course, my first thought was, if you had this tool, Grandpa, why didn't you let me see it and use it from the beginning? And often, and as many of his lessons were, you'll never learn anything if somebody gives you the information up front. You're better off to try and fail, or try and succeed, and then learn the trick that makes the whole thing easier and simpler, right? So, in the same aspect, it's gaining experience. So when we first started playing, for the most part, you gained experience by killing stuff. This is, like I've said in a previous video, this is the genesis to the murder hobo concept. That from the earliest days of RPGs, the way we accounted for advancement was, it was basically a numbers game. The more you slaughtered, the more you moved up. And then there was some factor in gathering loot and a few other things. It wasn't until I got older and I started playing, have other people running the game and watching how they handled it, and but I started getting this belief that there's more than one way of, I hope that looks kind of cockeyed. I hope we're getting the video all right, because I'd hate to have to go back and do this whole thing twice. That's that patience thing again, right? I learned to utilize experience points as rewards for more than just a kill ratio. I also learned that you didn't need to kill something to gain experience. Win or lose, you're learning, you're encountering things, and you're dealing with that, and you should gain experience for that. You should gain experience for doing puzzles and solving problems, and for things, everything from picking locks and successfully sneaking down a hallway and getting away from the bad guy, or out-thinking or out-talking the bad guys, using your head, your mind, and your heart, and individually. Another thing, Rob Gustafson did a video yesterday for YouTube's video response channel, and he talked about this because I had mentioned this in a previous video, that we utilize them as training material to some degree. If you are an experienced storyteller or game master or narrator, whatever you wish to call yourselves these days, it used to be dungeon master, but that's kind of got out of flavor anyway. You get new players, or you get players who are new to the game, or players who are new to your style of play, and some of the best ways to teach them to play in the manner you think is a good way to play is to reward them with the stick and carrot kind of thing. Don't beat them with a stick, mind you, just lure them along and reward them for cleverness and for learning things or using things exactly how it's meant to be used, however you want to do it. So there's many different things for using experience, or for doling out experience. And just like a milestone, the player's character development is in the hands of the game master. The game master decides when that milestone is going to be applied, or when they're going to dole out experience. In my current play-by-post, which I don't have a regular gaming group to meet on the weekends and stuff, I have not settled in enough to do that. My work schedule really is atrocious, so it's very hard for me to even function that way, right, to find people that can get together on a regular day and time. So for me, play-by-post is perfect because I can do this when the time allows me. In my play-by-post, I award a level of XP for each encounter completed. And within that encounter, if the players show some thinking outside the box, if they're clever, if they're funny, if they're entertaining, I add extra points. They're not a huge amount of points, but these points accumulate. And then, of course, as in D&D, as you go up in levels, your experience, inverted pyramid of experience, grows, and you need more and more experience points to get to the next level. And so, in that aspect, I will give increasingly larger pieces for each encounter. So the average The average character goes up a level about every 5 or 6 encounters in my world, and that's just my way of doing things. There's no right or wrong way of doing things, in my opinion, right? And as we can see, there's a whole bunch of different systems that have their versions. This is 5th edition. I'm sure those of you who play D&D are familiar with. This is the newest, and this is the version that introduced Milestones to me anyway. I don't know that Milestones existed in a prior form than that. This system is probably the oldest. It is the oldest D&D system that I currently have. I used to have the red box set and the blue box set, and I gave them to my oldest son. At least I'm pretty sure that's what I did years ago, and I don't know whatever he did with them. They disappeared, I don't know. But I kind of lament handing them out now, but that was then and this is now. These are the ones that I bought to replace the first printing of AD&D when it came out. It was the one with the red demon on the front of the DM guide. Excuse me there. My mother, God bless her soul, got caught up in that satanic panic in the 80s and burned them, burned the books, and then came to her senses after my grandfather told her she was being silly, and gave me a whole whopping $20 to begin collecting again. And the first book I ran out and bought, I believe, was this one, and I can't tell you the exact year I bought it, but I know it says I paid $18 for that. $18 for one of these days. I'm going to get out and review these books individually. It says May of 1979. That might have been when I bought that book. 79 or 80, shortly after that. Okay. Let me start with the player version. Okay. This is what most players are would be introduced to experience in the early 80s if they were playing D&D, Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, using these books. It says the experience is a measure of a character's ability in his or her chosen profession, the character's class. Each player character begins the campaign at first level and with no experience points accumulated. Thereafter, he or she completes the adventures and returns to an established space of operations. The Dungeon Master will award experience points to the character for treasure gained and opponents captured or slain, and for solving or overcoming problems through professional means. Characters with high scores in their major characteristic ability area might be entitled to extra experience points. See character abilities. When a sufficient number of experience points have been gained, a character will gain the experience level, i.e. character classes. It is important to keep in mind that most humans and demi-humans are 0 level. They do not have the ability to gain experience levels. Player characters are unusual and superior, hence they are the heroes of the story. Gaining experience points through the acquisition of gold pieces and by slaying monsters might be questioned by some individuals as non-representative of how an actual character would become more able in his or her class. Admittedly, this is so. The existence of spellcasting clerics, druids, magic users, and illusionists is unrealistically granted. Likewise, dwarven superheroes, paladins, elven thieves, half-orc assassins, and the like gain real experience from altogether different sorts of activities. This is a game, however, a fantasy game, and suspension of disbelief is required. If one can accept the existence of 12-foot-tall giants, why not the rewarding of experience points for treasure gained? While praying and religious-oriented acts are more properly the activities for which a cleric would gain experience points, this is not the stuff of exciting swords and sorcery adventure. So, too, fighters need physical training and weapon practice. Magic users long hours of study in tomes of arcane lore, and thieves the repetition of their manual skills and dictionary prowess. but none of this is suitable to gaming. It is, therefore, discarded and subsumed as taking a place on the character's off hours. As a rule, 1 point of experience will be rewarded for 1 gold piece gained by the character, with copper pieces, silver pieces, electrum pieces, and platinum pieces, gems, jewelry, and the like treasure being converted to a gold piece value. Magic items gained and retained only have a low gold experience points value, for they benefit the character through their use. Magic items gained and sold immediately are treated as gold pieces. The selling of price brings an award and experience on the stated 1-for-1 basis. Experience points are awarded for treasure gained, monetary or magical, and are modified downward if the guardian of the treasure or other monster, device, or obstacle, such as a secret door or maze, was generally weaker than the character who overcame it. A 4th level character versus a single orc is an overmatch, and only about 10% of the treasure value gained could count towards experience, but if 9 or 10 orcs are involved, the experience points would be generally on the 1-for-1 basis. Monsters captured or slain always bring full experience point award. Captured monsters, ransom, or sold to bring a gold piece, experience point ratio award, blah blah blah. Finally, clerics' major aims are use their spell abilities to aid during a given encounter. Fighters aim to engage in combat. Magic users aim to cast spells. Thieves to make gain by stealth, and monks aim to use their unusual talents to come to successful ends. Characters gain treasure by pursuit of their major aims. They are generally entitled to a full share of earned experience points awarded by the DM. Your DM will award your character or characters experience points as explained, or he or she has detailed information respecting the subject, and a chart of experience points will be given for monsters slain, blah blah blah. Remember, the character henchman will gain only 1/2 of total experience. Your referee might require you to inform him or her of new experience points totals in order to keep records. This prevents any fudging on the part of the overzealous players. Now that's a topic that has come up on more than one or two times. Let's be honest. If somebody's cheating, if you're handing out experience points and somebody at your table's gaining levels much faster or more rapidly than everybody else at the table, and or faster than what your set goal is, it's the player that's the problem. It's not the system that you're using. There's an argument, and there's a few people that believe that, if we just use the straight milestone, that's going to prevent cheating. I'm afraid not, my friend. And you know who I'm talking about, don't you? Yes, you do. They're going to cheat. If they're not going to cheat at your milestone, they're going to cheat in how much loot you gave them. They're going to cheat by drawing and hedging the bets on their cards. So or their dice rolls, they're going to tell you, I rolled a dice and I have a +6 modifier when I really have a +4 modifier to attack, because they're going to cheat. It's a player thing, and if that player thing cheats and keeps cheating, then maybe you need to either come to a conclusion that you're not wanting this person in your group, or you're going to ignore it, and then everybody else does the same thing. And at that point, as long as you're still having fun, who cares? Right? Who cares? But if you do care, you have to address the issue. As an experienced GM, I would consider myself a veteran experienced GM, almost, but not quite elite, because there are some people out there much better than me. I'm not going to just claim to be the best there is, because that's just absurd. I'm not. But I am broadly educated, if you will. I have lots of this stuff, and I've read every lick of it, and a lot of times more than once, so I'm still working my way through this version. I have a lot of, I don't know, every time they come out with a new version, there's stuff in there I don't like. There's stuff that I prefer the older style, and it's a control or a comfort zone thing. It's not that there's anything wrong with the new system. If somebody comes along and this is how they learn to play, because 20 years from now we have version 7 or 8, you see my point. It just goes and comes and goes. Anyway, you're going to have players that do that. You're always going to get that one disruptive player, or this one megalomaniac player, or the one player who, I really want to play the game, but they really don't want to play the game. They want to play the way they want to play, and in their head, it's a big joke. And some of us take this a lot more serious than others, and you have to gauge that when you get your crew together. And if that person isn't up to snuff, there's the door. Sorry. And I've had to do that on a couple occasions. I just won't tolerate that sort of thing. If you're going to cheat and then get caught doing it, I'm just going to say you can't be doing that. And if you're going to keep doing that, you can't be doing it at my table. You know, if you want to run it that way, you run it yourself. You know, get somebody else to do it for you. And let's see. Let me pause for a second. Alright, so this is the same version with the Dungeon Master's Guide. Now, I have, like I said, I have 2 more versions between this and this. There's 3, because I do not own 4th edition, but I have another that's clearly labeled 2nd edition across the top, and then I have the one that's everybody considers 3.0. So I never bought 4, and I didn't see the point in bringing all 4 of the versions to the table, and because it just repeats a lot of what these say, but there's some differences. Experience adjustment, division of experience points. The adjustment factor is inescapable with respect to weighing experience for points gained in slaying monsters and or gaining treasure. You must weigh the level of challenge, be thinking or fighting, versus the level of experience of the player characters who gained it. With respect to monsters, each hit die balances 1 experience level, counting each special ability and each exceptional ability as an additional hit die, also continuing any hit point plus additional. So it gets into the mechanics of how you can figure these things out, right? So it says tricking or outwitting monsters, overcoming tricks and traps placed to guard treasure must be determined subjectively with the level of experience balanced against the degree of difficulty you assign to gaining the treasure. Division of experience points. XP for slain monsters. All surviving characters took part, no matter how insignificant, in slaying the monsters are totaled. XP value divided. The exceptions, example. Then it gives you experience points for treasure taken, and then it gives you a chart over here. Following the chart, total determine the XP order for the slain. So if the monster hit die was 2 plus 1 to 3, be 35 basic XP apiece, i.e. Or 3 XP per hit point, and an additional 15 for special abilities, and another 55 for additional exceptional abilities. And that gives you some. Then there's an example of how that works down here. Special bonus award to experience points. These are the things, when we talk about experience, that most of us experienced GMs and players tend to think about, not this set of mechanics. If your campaign is particularly dangerous with a low life expectancy for starting player characters, or is a well-established one where most players are at medium and above level and new participants have difficulty surviving because of this, the following special bonus awards can be assessed. So, any character killed, brought back to life by means of a spell or device other than a ring of regeneration will earn experience point bonuses, blah 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 blah. Right? One of the things that the D&D in general and most game systems, and I've said something like this in another video recently, it's kind of the common sense set of rules. There are certain things that they don't add to these books that they ought to, and some aspects I think they just assume that you're going to know, or you'll come to the conclusion because it's obvious in their eyes and it's not necessary to take up valuable printed space for that I think that perhaps they should give a little more in-depth concept as to why we do what we do. But some game systems do. Some game systems have a little better at giving you the reasons why we do the things we do. And my morning orange juice. All right. Let's see. Yeah, this is the Middle Earth role-playing game, MERP, and I've done my share of reviews on the game modules and stuff for this system. Well, I really like the Middle Earth world setting. Iron Crown Enterprises did a really good job of it. I'm not overly keen on the rule books and the rule book for it, but so I often would supplement the Dungeons and Dragons rule books for the rules, because most of my players were quite experienced with it. Experience and advancing levels. Each character in a fantasy role-playing game has a level that represents how capable he is. Characters become more powerful and skilled by advancing levels as they gain experience. Experience is represented in play by experience points through the Game Master awards to the character for certain activities and achievements. Normally, a character starts play at first level, and as level increases, he acquires experience points from his adventure. A character's level does not necessarily increase each time he gains experience points. It increases when his experience point total reaches a certain point, as explained below. Experience points. Learning how to award experience points is one of the most difficult tasks that a game master faces. It is something very hard to formalize. Basically, a game master should award experience for ideas and actions by characters which are clever, intelligent, innovative, dangerous but not foolhardy, and above all, successful. Below, we summarize some of the activities that normally arise during a play, which could be or should be rewarded with experience points. The suggested experience points awards are guidelines, and the game master should feel free to modify them whenever common sense. Gotta love the common sense, and right there it says common sense. Gosh bless you, Iron Crown Enterprises. Indicates that they are out of line. The game master may total a reward experience points at any convenient time. This usually occurs at the beginning or end of a session. Note: all of these totals may be multiplied by 4 if the activity has never been performed before by the character, by 2 if the activity has only been performed once before, and by half if it becomes routine. See, there's another way of modifying the experience that you really can't do in a milestone setup. Hit points. At the end of the battle, character receives 1 experience point for each hit point hit he received during the battle, providing that they were not cured during the battle. Critical points. The points are awarded for any criticals inflicted on a foe, regardless of their effect. The experience points awarded are based upon the level of the foe and are modified depending on the state of the foe and the combat. And then there's a table over here that helps with that. Kill points. See, now this is where we get some of that mindset for that. Kill, we got it, kill, to get the experience, which is a downside. So that, in that aspect, the milestone is probably better if you look at it from that perspective. If you got a table full of potential murder hobos, maybe using the milestone system can help put a dent in that. It might throw a wet blanket on some of their need to kill everything. The experience points for rewarded for killing an active opponent or rendering him unconscious must occur in a combat situation, i.e. a true combat conflict and not a practice or stage fight, i.e. you just don't walk up to somebody in a bar and stab them to get experience. If somebody walks up into a bar and stabs somebody just for the sake of that, don't give them experience for it. That's kind of my philosophy on it. That's just, we're not going to reward you for asinine behavior, even if you think it is in character for your character. The experience points awarded for killing a character given, once again over here on a table. For maneuver points, experience points are given for the unique or inspired maneuver, static and moving, successfully accomplished during an adventure. For moving and maneuvers, see section 6.51. 100 result or higher must be obtained. So if your character is going to leap across the room, leap off a balcony and grab a chandelier and swing down to knock somebody over and save a companion from getting attacked from behind or something, that's an excellent opportunity for extra experience points, especially if they're successful. Spell points for casting spells, especially if you're doing so. These points are worth for casting spells during a combat situation. Casting a spell fails result in 0 points. The spell must have a purpose that aids the character or his group during the combat. Experience points awarded are given following exactly bunch of tables over here giving you some idea. See, here's some modifiers for the critical point or combat. Zero modifier if the foe is dead or dying, i.e. no points. 1/10 modifier if the unconscious or foe is stunned. The character is alone in melee combat with foes, etc. Idea points. I like this part. Experience points are given for ideas and plans that lead to the accomplishment of a goal or a successful event, action, or adventure. The Game Master should keep track of ideas, plans, and suggestions made by player characters to prove to be useful or successful. After an event, an action, or adventure is completed, experience points from 1 through 5 above have been awarded. The resulting experience points to all group members are total. The Game Master should award half of this total as idea points, dividing them up amongst characters who came up with the ideas based upon their respective contributions. This is all very subjective, so the Game Master doesn't need to keep an exact tally of ideas and can easily rely on his general impressions of the adventure. See, this is an example. After calculating experience points for combat and maneuvers of spell, the Game Master now calculates totals for each character. Traveling points. Character receives 1 experience point for each mile traveled on land in an unfamiliar area, 1 experience point for every 10 miles if flying or at sea. The character must be conscious and interacting with his environment. See, this is one of those things, that you get experience. You're breaking trail. You're going off the grid. You're going into areas that you've never been to before, and it's new for you. You're experiencing different kinds of flora and fauna and terrain and weather, etc., etc. And it makes perfectly good sense to earn extra experience points for that sort of thing. And then we have a miscellaneous points. Most of the experience points guidelines concern action in tactical situation, i.e. the situation involving detailed and precise activity, usually under time constraints such as fighting, maneuvering, or exploring. It's more difficult to award experience points for activities or accomplishments in a strategic environment, less structured than the tactical environment. Travel points reflect experience gained by traveling through new and stimulating regions. The Game Master should award miscellaneous experience points for other strategic activities not involved traveling, figuring out a riddle or a clue, planning a successful trip or adventure, etc. These points may be awarded by the Game Master for events that have a special significance, given the character having religious experience visiting a special place, accomplishing a special mission or goal, casting non-combat spells, etc. They're also awarded for any actions or accomplishments that the Game Master deems worthy of reward. Right? Just saying. Still, it's a little better than how these folks put it out. In explanation-wise, it gets a little broader, I guess. So, we're going to take a look at this one, right? Just a second. What is our good old, sticking to my chair. Got the air conditioning going, but it's so darn humid. It's still humid, and I'm sticking to my chair. The curse of being a fat man. Alright. Tears of Play. Well, I had it tagged here. Where is it at? Just stick that in there, Maybe I'm losing my marbles. Okay, let's see what the thing says back here, because I know I was reading it. I must have just put it in the wrong spot. I read it yesterday. Excuse me. points 15. Wrong page. Should have been. That's the right page, but I don't see. Strange. It says it should be here, and I thought I read it in here. Just losing my marbles. I could be looking right at it, and I'm not seeing it. Talking about gaining level, rolling hit die, constant moderate advancement, character advancement. Alright, character advancement table summarizes the XP you need to advance the levels from level 1 through the proficiency bonus. Consult the information in your character's class description to see other improvements you gain. We're just talking a basic list there. That's not a whole lot in here, is it? Not compared to the early stuff. Look at that earlier book, and it had a lot more information on the experience points in the player manual. This one doesn't have a whole lot in it. Oh, what do you know? It doesn't have a lot in it. Imagine that. Because we're trying to get away from the stuff. Well, let's look at the GM guide, DM guide. Let's see what it says. Determining XP thresholds. Use the following method to gauge the difficulty in any combat encounter. Determine XP thresholds. First, determine the experience point threshold for each character in the party. XP thresholds, the character level table below. Determine parties. See? Doesn't really go on about handling out experience points. It does a very poor job of explaining that in 5th edition, because they're trying to wing you off of that style. They want you to speed things up. That's at the end of the day. I think that's what a lot of the changes in 4.0 and 5.0 is tried with the idea of making it so your character almost is impervious to death and or failure, and expediting things so it doesn't seem to take as long. It's a point that for a lot of players, that's just exactly what we want to do. We want it to take point. We want it to take a minute. 82 through 84, which is right, but it isn't. And then the other one says 260 experience points. Alright. Experience points, XP, fuel level advancement for player characters, and most often the reward from completing combat encounters. Each monster has an XP value based on its challenge rating. Adventurers defeat one or more monsters by killing, routing, or capturing them. They divide the XP total of monsters equally among themselves. The party receives substantial assistance for one or more NPCs, counting those NPC party members that when dividing up the XP, blah blah blah. Absent characters. Non-combat challenges. You decide to award experience to characters for overcoming challenges outside of combat. Adventurers complete a tense negotiation with a baron, forge a trade agreement with a clan of Shirley Dwarves, successfully navigate the Chasm Dune. You might decide they deserve an XP reward. Starting point, use the rules. See, they're trying to tell you how to dole it out. Then we talk about milestones. You can also award the XP when the characters complete a significant milestone. When preparing your adventure to designate a certain point or event and challenges as milestones with the following examples. Accomplishing one in a series of goals necessary. Discovering a hidden location or piece of information. Reaching an important destination. When awarding XP, treat major milestone as a hard encounter and a minor milestone as an easy encounter. You might want to reward your players for their progress through the adventure with something more than XP and treasure. Give them additional small rewards and at milestone points. Here are some examples. Adventurers gain the benefit of a short rest. Characters can recover a hit die or low-level spell slot. Characters can regain the use of magic items that their limited use is expended. A level advancement without experience. You can do away with experience points entirely. Control the rate of a character advancement. Advanced characters based on how many sessions they play or when they accomplish significant story goals in the campaign. In either case, you can tell the players when their characters reach the goal. So it's a session-based advancement, story-based advancement, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, there's nothing inherently wrong with that idea. When, like I said, it's a style thing, right? For me, using the milestone, it somehow or another it diminishes the I don't know, potential for other things. We're just going to stipulate you get to here, or you reach point B, you earn a level. You reach point E, you earn a level. Okay, but there's no reward for style or color or flavor or humor or rewards for really rewarding for thinking outside the box. You're diminishing the play a little bit, in my opinion. And I'm sure there's plenty of you out there who will disagree with that, and that's fine. There's another little sidebar on this, and if you've stuck through this long in a fairly lengthy video, and I'm known for some pretty lengthy videos, you've earned some experience points and a reward, right? As a GM, one of the techniques for my style for play is, when it comes to experience and awarding experiences, is they mention it in the DM guide in various versions of making sure that if the players have henchmen, the henchmen gain some experience, even if the henchmen were not present. So if you have followers and they're back at camp, the base camp, keeping an eye on things, giving them a percentage, usually it's 10% or something like that, of whatever your characters gain, allows them to kind of keep up a little bit with the character group. They're not going to develop as fast, obviously, and they will fall behind, but they're not staying permanently behind. They are gradually increasing. The second part I'm really fond of is animal companions. If your party has animal companions, whether there's a, you've got a druid or a ranger and they've got a dog or a wolf or something, or your party's horses, for example, even traveling from here to here, the horses are gaining some experience as well. And so in my opinion, I always give 10%, 20% of whatever, and we're not chopping it off. So if your character earned 1,000 experience points, I'm not taking 100 of it away to give it to this one. They still get their 1,000, but your horse will gain 100 points. And some people will look at me so odd and say, well, why do you do that? If you look up in the monster manual, you can level up pretty much everything. I'm a big fan of that, and I'll do a video on it sometime in the near future about my opinions on, making low-level challenges much more challenging by doing that. And it surprises characters sometimes. It really can throw them off when they run in. It's nothing like running into an 8th level goblin hero adventurer or something who's got some chops and some gear that would be appropriate for 8th level, and here they think this lowly goblin is something that they can just kick with their boot and knock to the ground, and it turns out this bugger can climb up like a tree and take them down, or at least put some serious hurt on them, right? I'm just saying. So if you have a paladin, for example, a paladin has a warhorse, a charger. Well, that horse is smart and learning tricks, and you can get better if you give him experience. If the horses increase, they can increase their hit die. They can increase their ability to sustain damage, and they can learn new tricks. It's all in the back of the monster manual, at least in the versions I got. I don't know about 5.0's version yet, because I've yet to buy the monster manual for it. These books are so expensive, and I have to budget. I don't feel comfortable. Back in the day, I used to go out every payday, and I'd go to the bookstore, Ivor's game store, and I would spend an average of $50 out of my check. And when you're making just above minimum wage back in the day, you get a $200 check and you use 25% of it to go buy stuff. Yeah, well, but the books were like 20. These things would be like $20, $18. The modules are $8 to $10 back then. So I could buy a core book and a module and maybe a couple lead bubble packs for, back then they were lead figures, a couple of bubble packs of characters, and maybe a few more dice. I mean, I was spending a lot of money back in my youth instead of on less or more nefarious pursuits of a young man, perhaps. So that brings us to one last one, and we'll get to that, and then we can conclude this, and you can, I'll be grateful if you watched it all the way, and you can make all your commentary you want. Most game systems, majority of the game systems, I went back and I looked yesterday, the last 2 days, I was skimming through Shadowrun and BattleTech and Star Trek and most of them have a certain variant of character advancement or character leveling up, and some of them are quite broadly different from the traditional D&D style, which most RPG fantasy games that mimic or follow in the venue of AD&D or D&D have a D&D style award system for experience points. But a lot of other game systems use things like skill pool or dice pools or skill point adjustments, so they don't have levels per se. You don't go up in levels. You gain some experience by gaining additional dice that you can then apply to increasing attributes or skills, or picking up extra abilities, right? Or some equivalent thereof of feats if your game system has feats, right? So I'm just saying. So let's look at the Star Wars here for a minute. And this is kind of what we're talking about. Skill points. At the end of an adventure, the game master may assign you skill points. The better you did in the adventure, the more skill points you receive. You get them for doing great deeds, or for outwitting your opponents, or for playing your role well. You can spend skill points to increase your skill codes. You can never increase your attribute codes, not in D&D or in Star Wars, but this, mind you, is West End Games version. This is the older version. I would love to have the D20. I played the D20 system, Star Wars, for quite a few years, but it was a friend of mine's book, and for whatever reason I never got around to buying it. Money was a big problem in those days. You spend alright, so increase your skill code by 1 pip. You must spend as many skill points as the number before the D, or the dice. So an example here being increasing the skill of 2D or 2 dice costs 2 skill points. Increasing a skill of 5 dice plus 1 costs 5 skill points. Increasing a skill of 3 dice plus 2 costs 3 skill points. So pretty much straightforward and easy. That is the way it is. So, like I said, experience, XP. To me, there's so many more things useful for it than just carte blanchely saying, okay, you reach this point in the game or this point in the campaign and you go up a level. You can level up. There's nothing wrong with the milestone system. It serves a purpose. It expedites things. It makes things simpler. It's the lazy GM's way of doing stuff, right? In my opinion. But it has value. But the XP system outweighs it by a huge margin, because there's so many other ways that you can reward your players for creative use of and for presence, attendance. Hey, you didn't miss last week's session, so that cost you 50 or 500 XP, whatever. I'm just saying. So, as always, I'm interested in hearing your comments and anything you got to say and share that you want to put your opinion down. Just do me a favor. Try not to make an absolute. I get annoyed with that. I mean, so many people just, I don't like this. Why? Why? Give an example. Why don't you like XP? Why don't you like Milestone? Give an example. Don't just say blah. go blah, 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 blah. See? So, till next time.